afternoon. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence here. And I want to welcome you to Pillow Talks. These talks happen on Saturday afternoons. Next week, we'll be in conversation with kumahula Vicky Holt Takamina. Vicky Holt Takamina is a renowned kumahula, which is a master teacher of Hawaiian dance and an advocate for native Hawaiian culture and rights. You can find out about all the talks, the events, the performances, everything that's happening on the Pillow grounds, either on the Pillow website or in the season brochure, because you can just get the vibe. There's a lot happening on here. Now on to today. The title of today's talk is Connecting Through Time, 50 Seasons with Norton Owen. We took the name for this talk from the title of the exhibition inside, which I'm sure some of you have already browsed through, and if not, you will after the talk. Before I introduce my colleagues, let me say this. I've been pondering the sometimes unconsidered role of curator, not just at Jacob's Pillow, but also beyond, whether for an exhibition in a museum, a gallery, or a barn, but also how it might be in conversation with a dance festival and its seasons, indoors, outdoors, on the Pillow grounds, wherever. And I think sometimes from the outside, it just feels like, well, it's magic, or it's like the only way something could have been done. But what that doesn't take into account is the deeply researched and highly creative role for a curator for a space here. The space is here all around the campus. It takes conceptualizing, organizing, realizing, and all the labor along the way of finding somebody who can hang an impossible set piece inside a barn, all those kinds of things. I say this in advance to acknowledge the perspectives of each of these people, whom I'm going to introduce, that help tell the story of Jacob's Pillow, from its earliest days till today. Thanks, documentation team, right? We're going right into the archives after this, everybody, and beyond. I'm going to only give very brief introductions of these people because obviously we're in conversation. You're going to learn about them, and they will reveal themselves in this conversation. First, let me introduce Wendy Perron. Dancer, choreographer, turned writer, editor, scholar, turned back to performer, most recently this spring. Longtime editor of Dance Magazine, Perron is the author of 2 fabulous books on dance, as well as a writer of a new online series called Unsung Heroes in Dance History. Her own history of the Pillow starts with an invitation from Norton Owen, then director of education, to teach here in 1984. This season, and why she's here today, is she is the guest curator of the exhibition we'll be talking about. Welcome, Wendy.
There's one of my students. There's one of my students from '84.
Patsy Gay, my bookend here, is the archivist at Jacob's Pillow, where she is involved in all aspects of archival work. Previously, she was an archivist and associate producer for David Gordon's pickup company. Prior to her current role as archivist, Patsy was an intern in the archives. And then, centerpiece here, Director of Preservation, Norton Owen. In that role, he has created, developed, expanded the archives, curated numerous exhibitions, imagined how to bring a Pillow experience to the world digitally, and supervised public programming such as this. Not today, though. Today, he is merely the celebrity talent. Prior to his current position, Norton was a student in the school at Jacob's Pillow. He worked backstage. He worked in the box office. He worked for the school as an assistant to director Norman Walker, among many, many other occupations and opportunities. I mention all of your current and previous roles here because it's also Jacob's Pillow Alumni Day. Welcome to all of you, former interns, students, staff, and artists who have returned on this beautiful Berkshire's afternoon. We're so glad you're here. And the rest of you as well. Okay. So before we get to the current exhibition, I want to talk a little about the Pillow and exhibitions. Norton, can you tell us the story of the first exhibition you did here at the Pillow, and with whom?
Yeah, well, the first exhibition I did here is actually documented in the Special Collections Room. There are some photos that were taken that I took because it was an exhibit that I put together 1977, I was the box office assistant, my lofty title, my salary of $50 a week. And we were presenting The Spirit of Denishon, the Joyce Trissler Dance Company doing Denishon works. And I thought, from my lofty position as box office assistant, well, we need to make the connection for audiences coming. How do they know that there is some connection between these dances they're seeing on the stage and Jacob's Pillow? And I knew that we had some costumes that had been Denishon costumes, and they were in trunks. So I borrowed department store mannequins from England Brothers in Pittsfield, and I put them in the corner of Bacalar Studio, and I put the costumes on them. I feel like now is the time when I'm going to be arrested for transgressions against museum practices. But at any rate, the idea was I just wanted to connect the audiences and the pillow in some way. I had no idea what I was doing.
So, skipping ahead 2 decades. The Pillow's been given the barn by Marge Champion. And all of a sudden there's a new space. It's not just the corner of the Bacalar Studio. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the conversation you and then director Sam Miller had?
Yeah, because by then I had done other things. There are also pictures in there of the exhibit that I did at the Berkshire Museum in 1982. And then also around the time that this building was coming here, I had been asked by the National Museum of Dance to do a centennial exhibition for Ted Shawn's centennial, which was 1991 at the National Museum of Dance in Saratoga. So I was starting to get some skills. I mean, in Saratoga, I worked with a designer there, so I learned how much I didn't know about putting together an exhibition. At the Berkshire Museum, it was just Chip Schoonmaker and me, but we did it. And so once we had this building came to us in the beginning with the idea that it would be a visitor center, even though nobody really knew what would happen in a visitor center because we had never had one before. But it was built with the idea that we could have exhibitions. And Sam and I talked about what we might do for that first exhibition, and Wendy beautifully chose some things from the exhibition to include in here. So it was called Images on Common Ground, and it was pairing historic images by John Lindquist, who was one of our longtime photographers, with works by Philip Traeger, who was working here at that time.
Wendy, before I ask you about your response to that initial exhibition in Blake's Barn, I want to go back to the moment of invitation. I've made up a story. Pam Tadji calls you up and says, hey, I have this great idea. But that's my version of the story. Can you tell me a little bit about the invitation to curate this exhibition?
Well, it was from Kim Chan. Where's Kim? It was from Kim asking me to do this, and I didn't know Kim. I sort of knew Pam, and I knew Norton. But it sounded like a great idea. It sounded like something that I really wanted to do. I've been getting more into history, like immersing myself and being almost as addicted to dance history as I was to choreography. And so it was a great idea, and everything fell into place like 4 times a year. And I hadn't done anything at the Pillow in so long. So it was really a homecoming for me. To come back and work with Norton, and I had so much admiration for Norton, and we'd done some dialogues together and things like that. So it was just I love dance and I love the Pillow, so it was easy.
thing I was thinking.
Easy, yes.
I mean, obviously, Kim had the organizing principle of this moment in Norton's career where we can pause and acknowledge, 50 years, that's worth acknowledging. But you also had your own history with the Pillow, which is certainly, like, as I said, teacher, choreographer, dance writer, audience member.
Choreographer, yeah.
Like, that could have been a way to frame the story. Did you think about, letting your own relationship with the Pillow guiding becoming the perspective on which we looked at Norton's history?
Thanks, but no, it was really about Norton, and I learned so much about what Norton did and the whole thing of curating. I have co-curated a couple things before, but I've never actually been the one person curating. And it was a team. There was the designer and Patsy as archivist and Norton as intermittent advisor.
Ghostwriter.
Yeah, that too. So no, it wasn't about my history with the pillow.
So I'm not going to quote extensively because people have their own opportunity to read things, but I do have to quote this one line. I wasn't overwhelmed at first. Let's talk about that. I mean, because I say this because Patsy and I were kind of estimating, and maybe we came up with, maybe you could have had 100,000 images to choose from. So I was thinking about your perspective as choreographer in thinking about this, because sometimes too many choices make it almost paralyzing and that limitations can be really helpful. So how did you even start?
Well, one of the limitations was every time I said I would drop something, Patsy smiled. And she was like, that's the idea, Wendy, you got to drop things. You can't have 200 items in this. So although it was painful to drop things, because I had so many things that I wanted to include, but you know what would happen is Patsy would send me things digitally. So sometimes two pictures would look the same size on the screen, and it turned out they weren't the same, or they were completely different, sitting next to each other in the space than what I thought. So there were ways that I cut things in. And I was an editor of a magazine for 10 years, so the editor of that magazine for 10 years. So I learned, first of all, how to pair image with text. So that's one thing that I used a lot of text because I love editing. And also I learned how to throw things out, even if you love them.
So tell me about the moment. So you said you weren't overwhelmed at first, right, which assumes then there was a moment of overwhelm.
Yeah, because it was like, oh, this is Norton, this is dance history, I can do this is fine, we've got the schedule. But then when I think the first thing was, maybe you sent me the list of the exhibitions that Norton had had come up with and curated, and it went on forever.
Well, it was well over 100
yeah.
Over the years. Yeah.
So I tried to look at everything on that list and try to, okay, what do I want to ask Patsy that I want to look at? And then it was overwhelming.
So I think you're, for me, glossing over a huge moment of discovery for you as curator, which was putting yourself into the history of Norton's curation. And that there could be another story to tell, which would be, here's Norton and the school, and this is what the school is. Here's Norton working backstage, and this is what backstage is. But you chose a lens of Norton's history as a curator. Talk a little bit about that moment of realization.
Well, there were many histories. Norton as curator. And because I had noticed last summer when you curated the John Lindquist, just what a good eye he had. So it was like, as an eye. But there were lots of other things going on, like there were a lot of wonderful photographs of just working in the studio, not on stage, not finished pieces, but working in the studio that I loved. I wanted the whole section on working on the studio. I wanted the whole section on artists returning, we have Bill T. Jones, and we have one thing from a Michelle Dorrance thing, and Stephen Petronio. I wanted the whole section on that. But there was a time when Patsy said, we have to drop some sections. We have to drop some whole sections. So there were multiple lenses going on. But the number one thing was to reflect Norton, to reflect his achievements, as best I could in one exhibit. And I think I left some things out.
Thank goodness. But yes, some things are left out. But I also think you did an incredible job of structuring it so that we do get to see a lot of different aspects. And I'm very pleased by that. very pleased by it overall, must say.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask you about that in a moment, Norton. But Patsy, I want to bring you into this before we get to your specific role on this exhibition. I wonder if you could say something about what it's like to work with a choreographer and a choreographic mind on an exhibition that might be different from working with a librarian, perhaps. So that maybe I'm thinking about the role of creativity as a kind of an organizing principle, and your work with David Gordon, your work with Wendy, and you're also, okay, I got to get her to cut some stuff out, like you having to be kind of the rule keeper. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many reasons why I love dance archives and working in dance archives and working with people working with dance archives. But I think one of the things that's so magical about our field is that the folks who are our users are such incredible creative individuals. And so the way that they come to collections, the way that they do research is myriad and unnameable. And so, we certainly here at the Jacobs Pillow Archives get folks who are, writing books or teaching a dance history class or something that they know the rails and they know what they want, and we just help them get there, right? But I love, here we get so many, and when I was working directly with artist archives, like with David Gordon or with Aiko and Coma, artists coming into an archives is a fascinating experience and dialogue that you're able to get into. We had Brotherhood Dance here just the other week, and those artists, they were performing on our outdoor stage, and they were here in the archives talking about the piece they're working on is Black on Earth, and the next piece is going to be digging into water, and so they're like, well, what do you have on water, right? It's like, well, we don't have that cataloged that way, right? We're doing a librarian search term of and water, right? So it's about digging in and having this conversation, being like, what does that mean to you? What is it that you're interested in? Are you wanting people who are actually using water on stage, because we certainly have that? Are you people who are interested in sort of water usage and water rights? Are you interested in people who've had to sort of create visual interpretations of under the sea? And, we had this amazing sort of collaborative discovery process. And so having a curator like Wendy, who's coming in and bringing in these range of different approaches. Certainly there's that approach of the editor, so much with a text, but also this approach of an artist, and that she was exploring this collection in a creative way, and in a way where, this wasn't, Brotherhood Dance was here for one day of performance, right? I had one lovely interaction with them. Wendy and I were working together for half a year putting this exhibit together. So we got to have this whole evolving collaborative relationship in me doing my job of facilitating your access to our collections. And so it was truly such a joy, and I think is one of the things that you see on the walls of this exhibit, right? You see a creative artist exploring an archive and sharing a story. And I think it's one of the things that makes this exhibit so incredible, and it was one of the things that made our experience working together so enjoyable for me.
Yeah, there were so many surprises for me in what Patsy said was possible and wasn't possible and what she put in front of me. But I also want to say that part of my choreographer self was immediately to think of Blake's Barn as a space. And so I wanted to see if we could use the upper spaces. I used the beams. I had right away, I wanted to use the beams as a place for the text. I had an idea of having the memorable moments be hanging from the ceilings so people could bat them away, but that would be a little too hard. But it was my spatial awareness that started the whole thing of what to do in the space.
I'm going to ask you about the text in a moment, but I wanted to. The primary thing that we notice glancing into the barn here is the images. Norton, maybe you could just say something about the history of photographers at the Pillow and what their role has been.
Well, it has been essential to having an archive. It was one of the things that was happenstance in terms of, Ted Schoen certainly in the 1930s knew that he wanted to have things photographed, and they had a long-time relationship with a studio in Pittsfield called Shapiro Studios that would come out here and photograph them on site, the Company of Men Dancers. But it really very fortunately, John Lindquist happened upon the pillow. He didn't know about it until he was driving past on George Carter Road and saw the sign that said Sean and his dancers. And the way he told the story, he said, "Oh, take me up there," to the people who were driving. And so he fell into this place that totally captivated him, and he stayed for 42 seasons, starting in 1938. And he was his job was he was a head cashier at Filene's department store in Boston, but he loved photography as a hobby, and he fell in love with the idea of photographing dance here at the Pillow and the men dancers and all. And so it became and Sean was very keen to these kinds of relationships because there was no money. I mean, this was during the Depression that it happened. So Sean was not about to say, "Oh, I'm going to hire a staff photographer to come here." No, and I think it was really a barter arrangement. Sean would allow John Lundquist to stay here, and then in return, Lundquist would present Sean with a certain number of photos at the end of the summer. So it was happening, and then it continued to happen in very much that way. Not only photography, but also film. That he had somebody, Carol Lynn, who was involved in the school, but her specialty was also making films. And so they were black and white, silent films, but they were still films. They were still films of the movement, and that was happening. So we're very fortunate here because from the very beginning, Ted Sean knew that documentation was important and that he had to find a way to create that, even if he didn't have money to pay anybody to do that.
I'm going to just ask you to say something about Mike Van Sleen. We have 3 photos by Mike Van Sleen in the exhibition, and I mean, because he's sort of a happenstance story as well.
Totally. And Mike Van Sleen was working as audio supervisor backstage and started taking photos here. And after a few years, that became the focus rather than doing the tech work. He became somebody who was really excited about the photography, and he would stage shoots with different artists, and so it wasn't just photographing them in performance. In fact, the bulk of Mike's work and the beauty of his work was when he would have an idea about how to pose an artist. So you've got a picture in here of Carol Armitage, the choreographer, on a bicycle. And, but it's a wonderful image that Wendy was attracted to, which is great. And, we had an opportunity to work together, and Mike later moved to France, and he had an exhibit in the dance theater in Lyon, France, and asked me to help him with that, which, if I have to go to France, I guess so. And there was a wonderful being able to show imagery from Jacob's Pillow in Lyon during the Biennale de la Danse. So
the reason I point to Mike Van Sleen is because he, I remember the sort of urgency. There used to be a festival photographer. I should become that. And the sort of, that Sean's initial relationship with John Lundquist became something that was inspiring to many generations, which we're going to talk about in a moment. You were going to say something about...
Well, I just want to say one thing that I found is that I feel like Norton's relationship with each photographer was very important to just make all the archives go around. And that's something that I understood, again, at the magazine when I would be in touch with photographers all the time.
So I want to talk about the selection of images for all 3 of you. There's a beautiful image. There's a great piece of choreography. There's also a dancer you just love. And how are those things... Maybe sometimes all 3 are happening at the same time, but maybe sometimes it's not. And could you talk a little bit about your affection for somebody but not having a good photo of it, or this is a beautiful photo, I don't even remember seeing the performance kind of thing? Maybe, Wendy, you start.
I can talk about that because one of the performances here that just will stay forever in my mind is when Joanna Haga did Invisible Wings about the pillow being a stop on the Underground Railroad. And when the audience followed her, and Joanna herself was dressed in this way that was convincing to be an enslaved woman running away. And that moment was so searing to me, to see her be that and do that. And when it came time to, and then I asked her, I think for a memorable moment, and was it, oh no, it was the part with, Norton as being someone who sort of helped birth some of these things. And he was the one who gave her the information where she read this, that it was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And that became a huge, one of the most beautiful site-specific works I've ever seen. And I wanted a picture of Joanna in that moment, and I got a picture of Joanna in that moment, and it's not a very good picture. And I when I look at it, I think, oh, I just should have chosen one of the best pictures from that series. But I was so attached to that moment in my memory that I had to have it. And I'm sorry, because you probably would just gloss it right over it. It's not a particularly great picture, so that's one of my confessions.
Norton, how about for you in exhibitions in the past, that sort of question of, I love that dance, I want to show it up, or I want to show a work by this artist, and not having a representation that stands on its own as a piece of art?
Well, one thing I'll say about what we have here this year, of course, I didn't, as I think is clear at this point, I didn't make the choices. This was something that Wendy was doing, and thank goodness, honestly, because I don't know how I would have made choices. You talk about, having to leave things on the table or walk away from them. There would have been a lot more for me to have to set aside. But there were definitely things that that I would say within the scope of the exhibit didn't necessarily rise to the top because, well, there's the wonderful wall that is called the Griot, and which shows me with a lot of other people. But some of the people who were most important to me, I don't really have the greatest photos. For instance, with Jess Meeker, or with Barton Mumaw, or with Bessie Schoenberg. And so that's where what was wonderful that we were able to do this year was to work with our interns, Aubrey and Claire, and this was something that Patsy supervised them to make exhibits that are in the reading room, which I hope you'll take a chance to look at also, because on the tops of the bookcases in there are exhibitions that are not so much like a beautiful photo that is enlarged and put on the wall, but it's a snapshot maybe, or a piece of correspondence, or something else that's pretty unassuming in a way. But those, I think it kind of makes up for what you're talking about. How do you show something even if you don't maybe have one single great photo to show it? And so through those displays, I think we were able to include more things that were really meaningful. Well, Marge Champion is a good example too. I mean, there is a picture of Marge and I dancing. So that I love, but there could have been many, many more, because all during, well, let's see, I guess it was for about 25 years or so after the barn was moved here, I always wanted to, above all, please Marge, because this building had been on her property in Stockbridge, and she moved it. She didn't personally move it, but she had it moved here, and as a memorial for her son Blake, who was killed in a car accident when he was 25, and so I always felt that. I mean, yes, it was important for me to do all of what I wanted to do for the public and for dancers, etc. But it was really important to me that Marge feel like this was a good use of the barn that she had given the pillow. And I'm very happy that one of the last things that she said, and we have it on tape from 2014, which was her last year here, and we did a pillow talk to celebrate Blake Champion's life. And because I thought, well, gosh, it's been 25 years at that point since he had died, and there are not going to be people around forever who knew who he was, who would be able to give testimony about that. We did this Pillow Talk, and one of the things that Marge said was how grateful she was to me, because she said, "You make the barn live." And so I have tried to do.
I just want to say that in the look... Patsy was very helpful in sort of scouring every area for pictures of Jess Meeker and Barton Muma, because we knew how important they were to you. So I mean, it's one thing to hear the stories from you, it's another to find the good pictures. So we...
Yeah, I was just going to say, could you talk a little bit about your sleuthing activities?
Yeah, I mean, through this process, I became even more than I already was astounded by the import of documentation, right? Because what we have here in the archives is, you know, what we were left with. We don't get to go back and say, okay, but we want a really nice picture of Norton with Barton so that we can have.
I just realized Barton Muma, if you on the Weather Vane, one of the original men dancers and longtime presence at the Pillow until his death, I think in
2001.
2001. And Jess Meeker, musician for Ted Shawn and Men Dancers, and then returned to the Pillow every year to play in the school at Jacob's Pillow.
Until 1997. And that, you know, those astounding timelines, well, I'll say that they were an inspiration for me. I still haven't passed Jess's landmark, because he was here from 1933 until 1997. So what's that? 64 years.
Keep going. Keep going.
I got another
well
decade or so. And so that was very important to me. It was very important in terms of giving me a reason to want to do this. I mean, I saw and was able to experience from them firsthand what it was like to talk to people who were here in the very beginning, which was magical. But of course, I know that's not going to last forever.
You know, I love this. Sets me up for what I was thinking about, because when I walked into the exhibition the day of the gala, I was struck by some of these photographs feel like my old friends. I was either at the performance or they were in an exhibition that I had walked among, and some of them feel like, oh, here's a new chum. I don't know this photograph. And so I'm wondering, Wendy, about your thoughts about that. Like, how much did you want to say, aha, we've come home, we recognize this picture, versus, well, you maybe have never seen this before?
70-30.
Which way?
Well, 70 the old friends, and 30, or maybe 60-40. But I wanted, like, there's one of Bashkar from 1959, I think, and classical Indian. And then the line just happened to go with Unil Betancourt, a young student, someone who was a student in the musical theater program here. So it was connecting through time and connecting through genre and connecting through, and this is something that Norton emphasized to me, not only well-known people, but people who are less well-known, or, you know, not necessarily just everyone who's famous. So it was nice to throw in a student here and there.
You mean when you say that Norton emphasized to you when you had some intermittent conversations about the exhibition?
Well, we did have. Norton lives 2 blocks from me on the Upper West Side, so that was pretty convenient. And I went over and we had some long talks to begin with. So I got a sense of his trajectory and also his principles. One of them being connecting through time, another one being mingling well-known people with less well-known people, and another principle being that it be uplifting. And there was actually, that was another whole section I was going to do, is uplift. Like, oh, Ted Shawn and the dancers up here, and, you know. Oh, wow,
well, I was very grateful that you didn't decide to do an expose of...
So I've been thinking one of the things that I find striking about this, Wendy, which I'm tying to your deep commitment to dance writing, is the presence of the voices of other people of all sorts. There are students, there are staff, there are fellow dance writers whose words are represented, as well as the directors of the Pillow. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the decision to have us slow down and read, right? That it's a different kind of experience from walking through and looking at pictures and being struck by that beautiful dancer here and that group of dancers there. But here's a wall where mostly we're seeing stories from other people.
Yeah, and well, the first thing is the beams, the 4 beams, each one having one of the director's statements on it. Because that was, when each new director came in, Norton had been here. He was the one who held down the fort, and each new director learned from Norton. But I wanted Norman Walker, who gave you this crack in the wall, this entry, and that's my natural thing again as an editor, like ask for the voices, and then I worked with everyone very carefully on editing them. Because everybody writes too long. Everybody needs to be edited. And then Pam wrote a beautiful thing. And I do want people to read every word that Pam wrote. Because that's the way you learn more about people's attitudes toward what Norton has created. And then the little, I think I got 19 of the memorable moments. And that was, everything I did was based on an idea that Norton had. So Norton had this idea of memorable moments that he had done at the 75th anniversary in 2007. And we took some of those exact memorable moments and then we added to them. So when we added to them, I got to edit what people wrote and really try to get them to remember a moment. And I would say to them, you don't have to say, oh, I'm so thankful to Norton. Say what you actually specifically did with him. So I chose people who actually worked with Norton on one thing or another.
So I was also thinking about, in asking people for a memory, that what kind of inspiration it then turned to you for curator. I'm thinking about Suzanne Carbonneau, who was one of the first scholars in residence here, and her memory of Norton's exhibition of Paul Taylor's work. And if that had ever sort of been in your mind before you got the comment from Suzanne.
How did I come up with that? Suzanne also has a memory in the memorable moments of Cloudgate. I think, well, because I knew she was working on a book on Paul Taylor, so I thought maybe she would know more about those assemblages. I probably could have gotten a written thing from each person who donated one, and Denise Hurlin is here. Denise and Nathan Hurlin, they donated 2 of those.
Inside.
Oh, there they are. Yeah, I mean, I probably could have gotten them on the phone and please say something, but I thought of Suzanne Carbonneau because she's writing the book, so let her talk about that.
And Norton, do you want to just remind people what the assemblages are?
Well, these are things that Paul Taylor had on his wall, well, everywhere, but many of them on his walls at his house in Mattituck. And I just thought they were hilarious and wonderful and unique, and that they showed some part of a uniquely creative person who, okay, if he didn't have dancers in the room to choreograph, then he was going to do something, and that might be with a dead bug or there's a dead mouse in there, various other things that he used. And then part of the creativity was his titling. You know, there in the very bottom of the display case in there, there's just 2 little shoes, like baby shoes, in a box, and you think, well, what are those? And then you look at the title and it says, "These are 2 shoes, stupid." So, it doesn't work unless you look at the title also of what it is. But I thought that was a wonderful thing to show his creativity. And we did that once during Paul's lifetime. And then we did it again the year after he died, when I had free reign, pretty much, of a lot of things to possibly show.
Had there been an exhibit of Paul Taylor's assemblages in a major way before you came in and was like, hey, this could be an exhibit?
Yeah, it was my idea. And Paul was at first a little reticent. He wasn't quite sure he wanted them to be displayed because some of them are very personal in a way. But he finally decided that to go along with it, which was
I do want to
very
acknowledge
nice.
Deborah Jowett, who worked with Paul in a conversation about the assemblages the summer that they were here, which was a wonderful conversation, which you can find in the archives. I want to shift for a moment to talk about the wall of images that you mentioned, the griot of Jacob's Pillow, and pause to acknowledge there's a beautiful image at the center of it. It's a photo by photographer Christopher Duggan, whose work we see throughout the exhibition. And it's Norton with his husband, David, who died this past spring. I certainly can feel our beloved friend here today. There's also unusual for this exhibition, not just a photograph of David, but a photograph by David in conversation. It's a picture of Norton in Japan with an inset of a photograph of Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis. Wendy, I first want to ask you about the photograph by David before we talk about the wall of images.
Well, I thought that would be part of the pairing. That was one of the ones where the actual image of Ted and Ruth in the Temple of Kamakura in Japan was like this big. But when I saw it, I didn't realize that it was much smaller than the picture that David had taken 100 years later, or almost 100 years later. But we found a place. When you curate something, there are categories that you have to stick with. And there are certain things like that picture, the large one and the small one, that didn't belong to any category, really. And so maybe it was Patsy's idea, like, let's put it with the timeline. So it did sort of fit with the timeline. That was the biggest span of time, almost at 100 years. And the timeline was something we sort of collaborated on because I didn't want to get anything wrong. But there were a lot of things that that we didn't pass by Norton, because Norton was supposed to be sort of on vacation from this duty. He wasn't on this duty. He was. Yeah.
Well, thank goodness. I mean, of course, when the idea of doing this exhibition, I had already said that I was closing that chapter and wasn't going to do exhibitions. And then the word came back that the first exhibition that would be in Blake's Barn after me closing that chapter was going to be about me. So good that somebody else was taking that on, because I'm not sure that I would have been able to do that.
Total pleasure.
I would like to point out that you said there were rules to follow and then a rule to be broken, completely in keeping with an artist's self. So acknowledging that. Let's talk about the conversation between the two of you on this wall of images that includes David and Norton. I think some of those images are from Norton, your personal collection, and that feels like, in some ways, Wendy, like that would be the place where you had to collaborate the most closely.
Well, that was Patsy. Really, Patsy would say, "Oh, I have to ask Norton about that," and I would say, well, I want to see more pictures of Jess Meeker. Oh, I have to, so that there were official archives. And then there were sort of personal archives.
Yeah, and there's certainly things, as I'm looking at the wall too, one of the things that jumps out to me is no, we didn't have a great picture of Barton and me together, but there's a wonderful photo that Barton gave me of his last performance here at the Pillow in 1981, and it said, yes, thank you for demonstrating, and you can see it out there too, but he inscribed it at the bottom of it. It says, for Norton, the wearer of many hats and so beautifully worn, which is really nice. So,
Norton,
you wore those angel wings very nicely too. I remember that.
Norton, I was thinking about the moments of collaboration on this exhibition, but it's not the first time. Memorably welcoming the world in 2023, you collaborated with people. But I'm also thinking about Annie Leibovitz, for example, because that literally changed the shape of the barn itself.
Well, it's true. It's funny that you would call that a collaboration because, yes, it was a collaboration in the sense that we decided we wanted to do an exhibit of Annie Leibovitz's work, and then take it away, Annie, because we then gave her all the dimensions and everything like that, and she decided every single one. It was mostly paper prints that were, and this is something she's done in other kinds of venues, but she selected the paper prints and selected exactly where they were going to go, and then had them push pinned to these panels that we still use in here. And I can't tell you how many people I had that summer. This was in 2011. People who were horrified, who were like, how could you put a push pin through this Annie Leibovitz photo? It's like, well, I didn't do it, she did it. But in truth, that wasn't entirely accurate because she was working at the Hermitage in St. Petersburg during the time the exhibit was getting put up, and so she had assistants here who were doing it, and they would every now and then be on the phone with Annie, showing her the picture, like where something is, and she'd go, no, a little bit more to the right. No, that needs to be down below the other, like. So can we say micromanage but it was, in a way, a collaboration. She wasn't going to be able to do it without us. We weren't going to be able to do it without her. And as you say, we still have the remnants of it, because before 2011, whenever we hung things in this barn, there are these posts that go along at about this level, which meant that you had to hang everything above them, which is a little higher than one normally would hang things. I don't know why it never occurred to any of us, but it occurred to Annie Leibovitz that the way to deal with that was just to put panels up in front of it so that you would have an entire big surface to use rather than just going above or below.
Speaking of going above a beam.
Well, wait, I just want to say, I think a better example of a collaboration would be with Lois Greenfield, where she had these ways of wrapping things in the photos, and then you provided these other, to extend her ideas into space.
Yeah, that was a really fun exhibition because she was using lots of props, and for instance, there were maybe 5 or 6 photos that she had used that all had string in them in some way, and so we decided, okay, well then all those ones with the string should be on the same wall, and then we used actual string to connect where it was in the photo, and you would take then string going from that point to where it started in another photo, and so there was this background of like a web of string.
Immersive. You created an
immersive environment.
Yeah. And you can see that in this exhibit. I feel like you see a Wendy's love of Norton's previous curation. We have a section of Lois Greenfield. There's a section of Rose Eichenbaum. There's those fantastic Philip Traeger paired with John Lindquist prints. And so some of these threads of those previous, really deep, collaborative, engaging exhibitions you did peek through in here as Wendy has pulled segments of them into the kind of larger tapestry that she put together in this space, which I think is such a beautiful way to be doing that, sort of collaborating with the past, right? That has been so much of a theme for your work.
Yeah.
Okay, hard question. Patsy, starting with you. Favorite for today, image or pairing?
So I really, loved so many of these, and then of course I was also the as the information organization professional, the person who was putting it into a spreadsheet and saying, hey, Wendy, compared with the 10 last exhibits in here, you have 50% more images that you've chosen. We need to cut. So I was also doing that. So it was a little bit of the wearing the hat of cut, narrow. However, of course, as every single thing was something that Wendy was in love with, which was just a beautiful way to sort of re-see so many of these images that I work with day to day. I myself really fell so much in love with those images on common ground photos, the Philip Traeger pairings with the John Lundquist. Particularly, there's something for me about the fact that those exact photos are the photos that were on the wall here in 1992 in the first exhibit that Norton, as the new director of preservation, put on in this building that was new at the time, right? And something about, I mean, I'm an archivist, obviously I love old things, but something about that materiality, right? That like those are the exact prints, and we're seeing them again hung maybe even close to where they were on the walls that first time. Just that just gives me such chills and such excitement, and fantastic that we still have them, right? Like those were still in the collection, and we were able to pull up like those exact frames and those exact prints and put them back on the wall so people could be coming back to them and re-enjoying them again. Was such a joy.
Wendy, you can have a different answer tomorrow, but what's your answer for today?
Well, I'm looking right through there. There's one pairing that I made, and it's in a section called Inspired by Norton, because his idea of pairings just really, I loved looking at the hundreds and thousands of digital images with that idea of pairing. But what I paired together there was Carmen de Lavalade and Alvin Ailey in dedication to Orozco, to his full name, I should know his full name. Jose Clemente Orozco, that was done in the 50s by Philip Traeger. No, by John Lundquist. That is next to a picture I discovered last summer in your exhibit, also John Lundquist, of Pina Bausch with Jean Sebrun. He was one of her teachers at the Jos School in Germany, and he chose her to come here and be a partner in 1968. So what brings them together is that their arms are linked.
So the connection for you is
the connection
visual.
is visual. It's a way that the arms are linked, and the style is completely different, even though they're both in the 60s. But I do think about that pairing a lot.
Okay, I'm going to go rogue and not choose a photo, but an image, which is the Al Hirschfeld drawing of Ted Shawn, which is very large up overhead, and you can go in and take a look at it. But one of the reasons that Wendy, I think, chose to do that was because I was very involved in that project. And when we decided that we wanted to commission Al Hirschfeld to make a drawing to commemorate our 70th anniversary, it was at that time, we gave him really very few parameters, but the idea was that he should include Ted Shawn in the drawing, that he should include the Pillow Rock, and that he should include the idea of the outdoors. And then it fell to me to give him the imagery that he would use to take away from that. And so I found these photos and took them to him. He was 99 at the time, I might add. And to see what he then made of those very pedantic kinds of requirements it was remarkable to see. And then also to see, not only did he make this incredible image, but there was a practical side to it too, because it was our 70th anniversary. We had asked him to put 7 Ninas in it, and which are in the trees mostly, but some of you know that he always put his daughter Nina's name in the drawings, and you would have to find them. So we pick up, this was, Ella Baff was the director of the Pillow at the time, and Ella and I went to his studio, a great honor, to pick the drawing up, and it wasn't until we got it in the cab afterwards that we looked really closely and saw, oh, there are only 4 Ninas in here, and it had the number 4 next to his name. So we called him up and said, we wanted 7 Ninas, and he said, bring it back. So we took it back to him, and to see a great artist who also has a great sense of practicality, he just put it on his table and figured out a place to put more Ninas, and he took some white out and put it over the number 4, and then wrote in 7. Voila, we were done. So that was a great thrill.
And, I just want to add one thing to that. And you can get a T-shirt with that same drawing in the Pillow store.
Yeah. And you don't have to white out the number because it's 7 on there, too. Yeah, right.
So I want to say I'm encouraging everybody to pick their own favorite image or pairing for today. Have a different choice when you come back tomorrow or next week. I want to also say, alumni, you are invited, whether you've told us you're here or not, to join Norton at a reception by the Pillow Rock. I want to invite you all to enjoy this beautiful day. And thanks for, I'm going to call this a pause in the process, which is a term from the school of Norton's 50 years, and we look forward to many more. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thanks so much.